Welcome to Cultimatum, the podcast that delves deep into the culture of complexities of cults and human trafficking. I'm your host, Anonymous Andrew. Each week, we explore different facets of cult life and human trafficking, from the psychological manipulation to the brave stories of those who have escaped.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melody. I'm Andrew's co-host. Having experienced the depth of a cult firsthand, specifically the House of Yahweh, I'm here as an advocate for fellow survivors. My journey has inspired me to help others who find themselves in similar situations. This podcast is committed to respecting our guests' privacy. To ensure their comfort and safety, we offer them the option to remain anonymous.
Additionally, we would like to include a disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Cultimatum or its affiliates. Cultimatum is not responsible and does not verify for accuracy any of the information shared by our hosts and guests. The content discussed on this podcast is based on personal experiences, opinions, and speculation, and should not be construed as professional services or advice. Neither the host nor the guest are assuming liability for any misuse or reliance on the information presented. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and listeners are encouraged to conduct their own research and seek professional advice where appropriate.
Before we dive into today's episode, we want to issue a trigger warning. Some episodes may explore explicit and potentially disturbing topics such as sexual abuse, rape, human trafficking, suicide, and other sensitive subjects. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings and welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Anonymous Andrew. And hello, Melody.
Hi, Andrew. Boy, do we have a treat today. We have Naomi Swartzentruber. She is an ex-Amish and an author. Need I say more? I'm just going to introduce Naomi. Naomi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I want to extend a very big welcome. And we talked a little bit about this before, but I grew up around with the Amish around me on vacations. And I used to always see the horse and buggies. And all my life, I've never really understood what they were all about. And so this is a real treat for me because I want to know about the Amish. And I also never considered the Amish a cult, but from our conversation before we started, you consider them a cult. At least your sect is. So let's get going. I want to hear all about this.
Yes, so I do believe that the Amish, or at least the sect that I'm from, which is the Swartzentruber Amish, they're one of the strictest Amish communities there are. And I do believe that they're a cult because they brainwash us and try to keep us there. And when the kids leave, they go above and beyond to try to convert them to come back. Like my nephew just left and his mom and dad invited him home and they said they were working on him and they felt like it was working, and then he left again, and all his ex-Amish friends are just have too much of a hold on him for him to come back. So they're very all about keeping us there. And they're super strict. I had to wear long dresses all the way down to my ankles and dark colored dresses. I could only roll the sleeves up to my elbows. We had to wear bonnets. Our hair had to be covered. And from a very young age, I had to be filling the wood box and feeding the chickens, setting the table. At 5, I would have to get up at 5 in the morning and to set the table and help with chores. And
Naomi?
it was just always a lot of work. But I was very, yes.
I have a quick question. When you went back to visit recently, did you have to go by the strict dress code, even though you're out now?
I did not have to wear my dress. When I first left, they would tell me that I have to wear my dress or I wouldn't be able to come in. And I was like, that's fine. I don't need to come in the house if I have to dress Amish. I was very rebellious. And I literally wanted nothing to do with the Amish way of life at that time. And I never thought that I would ever wear my Amish dress after I left, but I actually enjoy wearing it now. and I do wear it, and I have a daughter, and she loves to wear her Amish dress. So we often wear Amish dresses together. But just to visit, and when
Can I ask why?
why?
Why do you wear the Amish dress now that
Because
you're out?
now I wear it because I feel like it's important for my daughter and even for me to remember where I came from, even though I don't
Okay.
believe in all their ways of lives. There are all the ways of the things that they do. There are some good things about the Amish, and I didn't leave because I didn't like the clothes. I think it's kind of cool. It's a dress, and I actually enjoy wearing it. And my daughter gets super excited. She's like, "Mommy, let's wear our Amish dress." And I'm like, "Okay."
So
Oh,
part of the
do you wear it
culture.
out of the house or just in the house?
Sometimes I wear it out of the house, but mostly I wear it in the house. Like I have chickens and a garden and stuff, so I don't go outside to do chores in it because I don't know, it's kind of big and long and stuff to do that for me, or I'm more comfortable wearing my other clothes that I don't really care
Okay.
about so much. So, but just mostly in the house. Sometimes we go to the store, grocery shopping and stuff like that. Of course, we get funny looks, but I don't care because it's part of my culture where I came from.
You've been getting those looks all your life. So yeah.
It doesn't bother me.
Doesn't bother you.
No.
Is there, boy, I have so many questions. Besides wearing the dress, and now that you're out, is there any other practice that you continue to do, either in the house or outside, that might consider to be Amish?
Well, I don't know that it's considered being Amish, but I do a lot of home cooking. Like I cook most of the time 3 meals a day because I don't like to get the store like the food at the store that's
Not
processed.
that,
It's not healthy, so I think
no,
that's
that's
probably not
fine.
Amish, but
No,
it's I don't know,
I
it's
cook
just
3 meals a
something.
day myself. I don't buy. That's healthy. No, no, no.
Right. So I think
Okay.
that's just being healthy. And I don't know, I just try to raise my daughter to have like good morals and be kind to others. And I guess one thing is probably like home remedies. I'm really into home remedies and stuff. So
Okay. So were you able to go to the hospital, and if you weren't then, would you now if your daughter got sick?
the Amish people actually do go to the hospital when they get very sick or when there's emergencies. But they doctor themselves at home, and they have a lot of home remedies they use. And like my nephew just had a farming accident on New Year's Day, and he was in the hospital until May 16th. So
Oh,
they
okay.
definitely can go to the hospital and use like modern medicine and stuff, but they always try to, if like that was an emergency, obviously they
Okay.
can't do that at home. They even have a hospital bed at home for him, and they run a generator to because he's paralyzed. They can and will use modern medicine and stuff if they have to. And
Okay.
I go to the hospital if I need to, absolutely.
Okay. So go back to the beginning, I guess. Were you born into this?
I was born into this. Yep, I'm one of 12 kids. There's 7 boys and 5 girls in my family.
Wow.
I'm child number 4.
Is that typical?
That's very typical. So my mom and dad, I can never remember. One of them came from a family of 16 kids and the other one of 15. And that was like a normal family size for my mom and dad's generations. Now it's more like 10 to 12. I mean, still, I have one brother. I know that's still a lot.
Still a lot. That's
That's
still a
still a lot
lot.
for average.
I had 3 kids, and I thought that was a lot.
I know. So they still have big families, but it's not like 16 or 15 all the time. It's like 10 to 12. I have one brother that has 14, but my 2 sisters, they have 12, and that's 11 and 12 actually, but that's very normal these days to have 10 to 12. Some even have a
And
little bit less.
and I would imagine that's to further keep the Amish tradition going. That's the more offspring you have, the more you have to work on the farm, the more you have to build
Right.
that. But you said you have one daughter, and
I
that's
have
all you have?
That's all I have, and I will not be having any more. I just turned 44 in May, so I
Okay.
am done I actually got my tubes tight because I kept having miscarriages. I wanted to have two, but it's just wasn't happening, and I didn't want to go through the emotional stress of having miscarriages. So, and my daughter is a miracle. I was told I couldn't have any kids, so you know what? We'll just stop there because
There you
with
go.
the one, since I'm grateful.
Okay.
Yeah,
There we go.
grateful that I have her. That's what I decided.
Yeah.
Just
And how old is your daughter?
not try for any more. She's 3.
Oh, she's young.
Yeah.
She's still quite young.
Yeah, she's young. She's just 3. Yeah, I was told at 40 that I couldn't have kids, and I finally gave up. And then 5 months later, I got pregnant with her, and she's really is a miracle. She's amazing.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Okay. And so just for a time frame here. So your daughter's 3.
I'm 44.
And so you had her at 39, 40, 41.
I was almost 41 when I had her.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was almost 41 when I had her.
How long have you been out?
In 2 days, it's going to be 27 years. I left in 1997 on July 13th on a Friday.
Okay.
Friday the 13th.
So your daughter was not born into the Amish culture?
No, she was not.
Okay.
But I take her to visit, and my family just loves her. I just came back on July 1st, actually, I was there for 9 days in Iowa, southern Iowa with her. And my family, they just love her. And at first, like the first day, she was super excited. She's like, I want to go play with the Amish kids. And she was gone. Like, she was just out there playing on the farm, and it was amazing. And after that, she was a little more she was overwhelmed, I think, by all the kids sometimes, because there was just so many kids and they all wanted to play with her all the time, and she got overwhelmed. But by the end, she was like, she knew a lot of their names, and she was having a great time. And even my mom and dad, like, they just adore her. They love her.
Are they making an exception for you, Naomi? Because most of the time, don't the Amish shun family members that leave the group?
Okay, so they are not. So there's actually a big misconception, I feel like. So in order to get shunned, you have to be baptized. And I was not baptized. They're all different, but my community gets baptized at 18 or after. And I was determined to leave before I was 18, so I left when I was 17. And because I was not baptized, they cannot shun me. Now, some of my brothers and sisters belong to a church that's actually not as strict as as the church where I came from. But when those kids leave, some of the parents do not allow them to come visit. Rather they're baptized or not. Like, once they leave once they leave, they cannot come home unless they are there to stay. I did that on purpose because I did not want to be shunned.
Oh, smart girl.
I don't know. I didn't even know much about it back then, but I just knew that I have an uncle. My mom has a brother that left. He's not been Amish for as long as I can remember. I don't know when he left, but when I was, maybe even before I was born, I don't know. But I remember when him and his wife, they would come to visit, he would have to eat at another table because he was baptized before he left. So he's shunned. He could still come visit. He just can't eat at the same table as the members. I didn't want that restriction put on me, but I knew I didn't want to be Amish, and I didn't, yeah.
Okay, so you left at 17 before you were baptized, so you wouldn't have to be shunned, but at 17 you knew you wanted to leave. So let's backtrack to what led up to you wanting to leave. Tell us about those 17 years that obviously they were not great years.
I was a very happy little Amish girl. I thought it was like the greatest thing ever to be Amish until I was about 13. We got new neighbors that moved in a couple miles from us, and they had a little girl that was 11 years old, and she started coming over with her parents, and she was just as fascinated by us as we were by her. And soon we became friends, and we were going to their house as well to bring in baked goods and vegetables and things. And that's when I started rebelling. I noticed that she had they had phones, a TV, a radio, she had a bicycle, sandals, shorts, her hair was down, her nails were painted, like all the little things that little girls can have. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like, I wish I could have that. And I admired it, and I started rebelling. But I never at that point didn't think I would leave. I just was longing for these things. And then when I was 15, my sisters and I started going to yard sales, and I bought some English clothes. And also, I walked in on my cousins one Christmas. We went to go ice skating, and they had a radio on their table. And I walked in, the curtains were down, we knew the parents were gone. So my brothers and I went to go ice skating, and I walk in, even when the curtains are down in Amish, like, you don't knock, you just walk in. That's just what we do. And they were so surprised to see me. One of the boys grabbed the radio, it was a boombox, off the table and put it under his jacket and ran into his parents' bedroom. And he was like, they acted like nothing happened. And I went to tell my brothers they were home. And I was even though I longed to have those things, I knew they were forbidden. And I was furious that they had a radio. We were all upstairs in the afternoon. I went downstairs and I was searching in the bedroom to find this radio. And when we got home, I told my uncle, who was working for us at the time, I was like, oh, I saw this radio. Like, this is horrible. I couldn't wait to tell my mom and dad. And he's like, hold on. And I write about this in my book, actually. It's pretty funny. The Amazing Adventures of an Amish Stripper. I write about it in my book. And he's like, well, maybe one day you'll have a radio. And if you don't tattle on your cousins, I won't tattle and tell your parents when you have your first radio. So I was like, wait, what? It's okay. And he's like, yeah, sometimes some of the Amish older kids, like teenagers, when they go to the singing, they have a radio. And I couldn't believe it, but I was so excited. I was like, oh, maybe I could have one too. And like 2 weeks later, one of our cousins brought us a radio. So I was listening to music and dancing and wearing English clothes, and we had also got a camera around that time, and we had to hide the radio, the camera, and the English clothes in the attic or in the barn. We would hide them in the barn sometimes because we couldn't have these things when my parents were around, because they would take them and destroy them and throw them in the trash. So we had to hit them, and thankfully I never got caught. And then when I was 16, my cousins and I and my sister, we were all really close, my sister and our two cousins. One Sunday at church, they're like, you'll never guess what we did. And I write about this in my book as well. And we're like, what did you do? And they just kind of nudged and giggled, and they wouldn't tell us. And they gave us a number. They're like, why don't you call these boys and you can find out what we did? So they gave us a number to these English boys who they were sneaking out with and having sex. So that's what I started doing as well. So at 16, I started sneaking out to see the English boys. And that's how I lost my virginity in a cornfield in the snow. It was, on a pair of jeans. I lost my virginity like that. And then one night I got caught sneaking out. They were going to come pick me up. I had called during the week to schedule the pickup on the weekend. And it was a Sunday night. I baked the cherry pie for the boys because they had heard that Amish girls are good at baking pie. So I made a pie for them. But when I got the pie, it was next to my mom and dad's. The pantry was next to their bedroom, and my mom heard me make a noise. But I was like, by the time she was calling my name, I was already like halfway to the meetup point. But I heard my mom and dad yelling my name, and I threw the pie in the ditch, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm running away. And I was like, oh, I just couldn't sleep. And I was going for a run. They didn't believe me. But after that, I was like, I am definitely running away. I was like, I just can't keep sneaking to have fun my whole life. Like, I am done sneaking out. And that was like, I don't remember if I was 17 yet, close to it. So I turned 17 in May, and then in July, the 13th, is when I ran away. But I rebelled really hard as a teenager. And
how exactly
that's
did you
why I
run
decided
away?
to run away.
Did somebody have to help you get out? How did you run away?
That's a really good question. So I knew at that point I wanted to run away, but I didn't know where I would go or what I would do. But I knew I needed to get a job because I knew the English people had to get a job to work to make a living so they could buy things. Unlike the Amish, I mean, we work, but it's different there. So I had no idea. And one morning I was picking strawberries by myself. And this guy that used to deliver logs to my dad's farm, he had a sawmill, comes to buy strawberries. And he came to the garden to talk to me. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh, I could live with him. And I just blurted it out. I was like, I want to, in my book, his name is Kevin. I was like, Kevin, please help me. I want to run away and I want to live with you. And he was like, you are crazy. There's no way. Your mom and dad will hate me. You can't do that. And I was like, well, I might be crazy, but I definitely want to run away. And I was 17, he was 33. I didn't run away to be with him. I just wanted to not be Amish. So he told me that he would come back in a week and tell me if he could help me, if I could stay there or not. Mind you, I had no idea this man was married or had a son. I just wanted to leave the Amish. A week later, he comes back and says that I could stay with his mom and if I helped take care of her. And I was like, okay. And I don't remember if it was that first time when I told him or the second time. I think it was the first time. After that, he looked around and there was none of my brothers and sisters around. So he asked me to follow him to the barn and he made me give him a blowjob right there in the barn stall. Like,
Oh,
he sexually abused me even before I was Amish. And after I ran away, he continued. And I didn't know until I ran away that he had a wife. Like the night that I ran away is when I found out. And I didn't know how to say no to him. Like, he exploited me. I was so vulnerable and he took advantage of me, which in my book, I'll have to send you guys a copy of my book because there's a pattern that I keep repeating. I let guys take advantage of me throughout my life. And I feel like that really set me up after I left to fail kind of in the outside world because I didn't know, like, no one ever talked to me about sex or relationships. And here's this man that's like twice my age exploiting me and taking advantage of me. And I don't know, I just shoved it down for so many years. But writing my book, I felt like it was very therapeutic and I was able to release a lot of that trauma that I had from when I first ran away.
Lots of questions. Number one, you keep referring to anybody that's not Amish the English.
Yeah, we call everyone that's not Amish. Doesn't matter what color, where you're from, what country. Everyone that's not Amish, we call English.
Interesting.
So, I don't know why. There's just
their terminology.
the English people. Yeah, it's just the terminology. So everyone, when I say the English, that doesn't mean they're from like England or London or anywhere. They're just someone that's not Amish.
Okay. Do you know the history of the Amish? When did they first? So America was settled in, I don't know, 1600, and then 1776 we got our independence. When did the Amish start existing?
You know, I always get it mixed up. It's either 1685 or 1865. I can't remember which one it is. But in one of those, I know,
Been a
I
long
wish I
time
could
then.
remember, but
it was here in America.
It was
started
here in America, and they came from Germany. They came over from Germany. Like, there's my grandmother who's 93 years old. I haven't seen her in like 4 years. I was gonna see her this last time, but long story, I didn't get to see her, sadly. But her grandfather came from Germany on a boat with a trunk and a cup that he used to drink water and eat soup while he was on the boat. And that trunk and the cup are still in our family somewhere.
Wow.
So that would be my great-great-grandfather, I think.
Okay.
So I don't know how long ago that was, but the Amish were here already, even before then. I think it was in the 1800s. I'm sorry that I can't remember.
Oh, that's okay.
No, that's fine. That gives me an idea.
Yeah. I just Googled it. It said mid 1700s. That's what Google says. Mid 1700s is what Google says.
I always get it mixed up. It's like somewhere in there. Thank you.
But there are different sects, SECTS. So
yes.
So you were part of the Swartzentruber, which were the more stricter ones, but there were other Amish. Were you in Pennsylvania? Is that where you grew up?
I was in Michigan. I grew up in central Michigan. And so I was in like central Michigan, and then north of town were the Beachy Amish, and then south of us was another group of Amish. And they try not, like right now what's happening, I call it the great exodus of the Amish from Iowa. So my parents and a lot of my brothers and sisters moved to Iowa probably like around 14, 15 years ago. But what's happened is the Swartzentruber Amish church like split into this other church out there. And there's actually 3 different churches out there now. And when the community started, was just the Swartzentruber Amish. And this one church, there's only 12 families left of this one church. It's not the Swartzentruber Amish, one that's not Swartzentruber. They call themselves the Sam Church. They're all moving out of Iowa, they bought 400 acres in Wisconsin, and they're all moving there, the ones from Iowa. So they don't like to be mixed like the churches, they don't like to be mixed together, if that makes sense, like in the community.
Yeah.
So
When you say church, what religion they believe in? A God, I'm guessing.
they
Is
believe in
it
God and Jesus. It's a Christianity.
okay?
But there's like the strict ones and then the less strict ones, but they don't like to live it's not interracially, but like the church is mixed in together living. It's an interesting thing that I'd actually just found out, how strict they are, how much they don't like that. And for example, one of my brothers in Michigan, where I grew up, he lives there, and he is selling his farm and like everything, and he's buying property south of the town south of where we were, and joining this less strict church. But it's crazy because I just can't imagine like leaving everything like that and just starting over. But he doesn't want to be with the strict church, which that is understandable. Like this new church, they can have little phones in little shacks, and they can have solar power, and they can have bicycles and things like that. It's still Amish, but not like the Amish how we grew up.
Less
and
restrictive.
that sect or that
Less restrictive.
and those are the ones that allow Rumspringer.
That group actually does not allow the Rumspringer, but my youngest sister, I know there's so many different sects and rules and communities. My youngest sister, the Chino church that she belongs to, they actually get the Rumspringer. And there's groups like that, but I don't know what the names of those churches are or anything.
So I just brought up a word that we haven't talked about, so the audience may not know. Can you explain, even though it wasn't part of your Amish culture, can you explain what Rumspringer is?
So Rumspringa means running around, basically, in Amish. It's when you turn 16, you get to go and live and be English and basically try everything you want and live how you want. And I think it's 94%, 90-some% of them end up going back, and some go back sooner, but a lot of them go back at 18 or 21. It just depends, like when they're ready.
Can they do Rumspringer before they're baptized, or they have?
No, they do it before, because once they're baptized, then they're not supposed to do that anymore.
You mentioned something about the Amish language. Is there a separate language, or is English?
It's Pennsylvania Dutch. It's kind of like German. Like I can understand a lot of the German, and Germans can understand me a lot. But it's like it's called, the actual language is called Pennsylvania Dutch.
Okay. So when you're growing up, do you learn English and Pennsylvania Dutch?
So at home, we learn to speak Pennsylvania Dutch, and then in second grade, we have to start learning to read in English, and to actually during class and stuff, and even during recess, sometimes we had to speak English. I used to hate it. I hated it so much, but now I love
learning
it.
English? You
Learning
hated
English. Because I couldn't, like, I had a really hard time to say the TH sounds. And my aunt was my second grade teacher, the one ironically that just got married when I was visiting. She's 57 and she just got married, but excuse me, she would, if we pronounced the words wrong, she would smack us with a yardstick and say, stick your tongue out, and say mother or this or that. Like she would smack us with the yardstick. So it was very intimidating because our aunt would smack us with this yardstick if we didn't say the words right.
Well, you must have worked because you got it right. Because you pronounced mother correctly.
Right? It's like I had to practice. It was crazy and scary.
You mentioned, I'm sorry, Melody. Let me know if you have a question. I have so many. You mentioned your book. What's the title of your book?
The Amazing Adventures of an Amish Stripper, an Erotic Memoir.
Okay. You have to explain what that.
Yeah, I think you're going to have
What
to
is-
explain that.
Were you a stripper?
So at 19, I became a stripper, and I was a stripper for 20 years.
Oh my god! I'm not judging. I'm just like, wow.
I
Where did
know.
that come from?
I know. It's kind of crazy, but I so after I left, I stayed with this man's mom, the man that was exploiting me. I stayed with his mom for a couple months, but she was gone like 3 days a week for dialysis, and she lived down this dirt road in a cluttered old farmhouse that was falling apart. I was so bored, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I almost went back to being Amish, but instead, Kevin and Christine, the people that helped me run away, they remodeled their storage room in their house, and I moved in with them. And I was there. Well, so that was like a couple months after I left. I moved in with them, and then in January of '98, I went to Ohio with my ex-Amish cousins, and I met a guy there, and we started dating. And he ended up moving to Michigan and working in Detroit with Kevin for a little while, and we got moved the trailer onto their property, and we stayed in it. And then after I was 18 in August that in 1998, we moved to Minnesota because that's where he was from. My first boyfriend. He broke up with me after a year and 3 months, and I was just devastated. Now I was on my own in a new state that I hardly knew anyone, but I did have a really good friend that I made, a girlfriend, and she was like, "There's lots of ways to make money." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, you could be a dancer." And I was just speechless. I was like what? Like a stripper? And she's like, "Yes." And she like giggled and laughed. She used to do it, and I just couldn't believe it. Like I thought that strippers were bad people, and I couldn't even, like, it just blew my mind that she would even say that. So she was like, "Let's go out on a Friday night." And she wouldn't tell me where we were going. She's like, "Have a beer." And we're driving and driving. And finally she pulls into, like, it's like in the middle of nowhere. And there's, looks kind of more like an old warehouse with this sign with like the silhouette girls spinning. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're at a strip club." She's like, "Yes, you don't have to do anything. You can just look." And she left shortly. She left me at the bar, and she comes back, and then shortly after that, a man, and that's like the opening, my book, my prologue is actually this night when I first was a dancer. And the manager asked me to come back to his office, and he asked me where I was from and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, "We'd love to have you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, absolutely not. I could never do this. Like, I could never be a stripper." I was terrified. Like, these naked girls were looking at me as I walked in through the club and to my chair at the bar. It was so discouraging and terrifying to me. And I went and sat down, and three girls come, and they make small talk, and they like grab me and pull me to the dressing room with my girlfriend behind, giggling. And they stripped my clothes off and all agreed on a hot pink bikini and pushed me through the door onto the stage.
Oh my
I was
god!
like, "Oh my gosh, there's no turning back. Like, I'm on this stage now." Like, I wanted to cry, but I blinked my tears away, and I have, my hair's not as long now, but I had really long blonde hair. I just let it fall in front of my face, and I walked to the pool, and I grabbed a hold of it, and I tried to move sexy like I saw the girls doing while I was watching, but I'm sure I was not very graceful. I don't know. I just did the best I could. And then they told me on the second song, on the first song I had to take my top off, and it was a nude club. So on the second song I had to be completely naked, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm definitely going to hell," because like I was taught that, like, we can't like exploit our bodies and be naked in front of people. But I don't know, at the same time I enjoyed it. And after people were clapping and throwing money, and after the second song I gathered my money and my clothes and I walked off stage. I was completely naked. I don't know, it was just all these emotions. And I thought about my Amish family, but I was like, there's no turning back. And I had $55. And I was like, wow, that was so cool. I was like, maybe I could do this after all. And I went and talked to the manager, and I went back the next night and danced for 20 years. I loved it. It was amazing.
So,
It was
like,
so fun.
what would be your typical nightly income? Like, you would.
Well, it depended. Like, I like to say, like, a good average was $300 to $500 a night.
Wow.
of working like
I'm in the wrong business.
but that was not. I had nights when I made $60. I had nights when I made like no money, and nights where I made $1,000. The most I ever made was 3,300, and that was when I lived in Las Vegas. I lived in Vegas for 6.5 years.
Oh, so you went
Well,
to Sin City, where
yes, I went to.
that's where the big action is.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, yeah. After I danced in Michigan for like 4 years, I went. So after like 4 months of dancing in Minnesota, I decided to move back to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I danced there for 4 years. And while I was there, I got into drugs. I started going to college,
Goodness.
and I write about all of this in my book. So I started doing coke, and then one night there was no coke, and I never even heard of crack, but my friend was smoking crack, and I was like, if he can smoke crack, of course I can too. And no one ever talked to me about drugs or anything before or after I left the Amish. And I just thought that if my friends can do it, like I wanted to try everything. I was like, I don't know, I was just so young
You
and
were a
wild.
dog off your leash.
Yes,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
going wild on, like, really, I felt sometimes out of control because there was just so many things to do. And I was a crackhead for 2 years. I literally like lost everything except my life, pretty
Yeah.
much. And that's when I decided to move to Las Vegas. So I would sell myself so I could make money, which I felt horrible to do that, but I didn't want to not eat or be on the streets. And I was on the streets for a little bit. But a client that I would see, he invited me to go to Vegas with him. And that's when I realized if I wanted to stop being a crackhead, that I had to get away from the people that I was hanging out with. And after visiting 4 times, I met a guy out there, and he was just had was dealing with hard times, but he was getting back on his feet too. So we decided to move in together and try to make a life for ourselves. And it was in 2004 when I moved to Las Vegas. And I did stop smoking crack, but a lot of other things happened that I actually read about in my book as well.
I have a question real quick. Were you able to get off the crack without
Yep.
any rehab, no 12-step program, nothing like that? You just changed locations and determined in your mind you were going to stop?
Yes, I was determined to not be a crackhead. Like I knew that I didn't run away from the Amish to be a crackhead. I knew that for sure. And I realized when I was in Vegas, just visiting, we would stay for 2 weeks. I would feel like a person, and I never even thought of crack when I was there. So, yes, I did move to
Good.
Vegas, and I didn't do
Wow.
any. People kept telling me I needed to go to rehab or a 12-step program, and I'm like, I don't think that's gonna fix my problem. So
Well,
that's what I did. I
congratulations.
moved and I got away with thank you. And unfortunately, there were lots of other drugs that I experimented with, like Molly and ecstasy and stuff when I lived there, but not to the extent where I would lose my belongings and where I lived and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Well, Molly and some of the recreational stuff is not addictive or as expensive as crack can be. Crack can be a daily habit, and it can be hundreds of dollars a day. Um, I I can say that because I was there. Um,
right.
yeah, I'm in recovery
Oh,
myself. So,
okay.
but and you were in Sin City, which is so everything that you're saying that's in your book makes sense. I don't want to generalize, but I would imagine there are many. First of all, Las Vegas and or the surrounding counties, prostitution is legal. All right, I don't think it is in Las Vegas, but outside of Las Vegas. So, but Sin City is that's why it's called Sin City. What happens in
Right.
Vegas stays in Vegas, and
Right.
um, that's where men and women go to party, and so drugs and prostitution and raves and strip clubs are all that's what happens down there. So
Exactly. And the temptations were, I swore when I moved to Vegas, I was like, I'm never going to be a prostitute again. I'm never going to be a crackhead again. But that changed when shortly when I was living in Vegas. And I don't know, I just saw like how much money some of the girls were making in the cars and things they were buying. And they were seeing the men outside the club. And I eventually started doing that as well. And the guy that I was dating, he would find a really good job, and then he would find a reason to get fired, or he would do something to get fired, or he would just quit. So I was supporting him financially, and it was eating at me. It was horrible. And I never told him that I was a prostitute. But and finally, I also was just like, if I have to support him and me, that I'm going to do it how I want to do it. I know it doesn't make it right, and I should have told him. And he actually became very violent, and he tried to kill me one time. And thank goodness he didn't. But I write about all of that in my book as well.
Does any of your family know any of this?
So I don't know. I know some of my family knows a little bit about my addiction problems, and I don't know. I think I would be naive to think that my family doesn't know that I was a stripper, because somehow the Amish people know everything. However, we don't talk about it. And I do know that my mom and dad, because I was just there, they know I have a book. We've never talked about me being a stripper or a prostitute or any of that stuff. But I don't know I am certainly not comfortable talking to them about it. And I don't
Of
think
course
they
not.
would be comfortable talking to me about it. So it just never comes up. Like, they don't really, my mom and dad don't even really ask me what I do for work anymore. Like, they don't even ask.
Melody, what's interesting, what I'm hearing here is all the other cults, they tell you what is going to happen to you if you leave the cult. Your life will go downhill. You know, you will lose your friends, you will lose your job, you will get cancer.
Yes.
Or in this case, you could go down a dark path.
Yes.
And in any other cult, if this was her, they would have thrown this back in her face. They would have said, "Hey, see, this is why we tell you not to leave the cult."
You left
it's
the Amish,
interesting.
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
This is happening while you left the Amish, and yet this is not the case here. They're not throwing it in her face. They're not even talking about it. It's like a no discussion, which
I
is
think
interesting.
it's like too taboo almost for them to
Yeah.
talk about. And my sister, man, my sister just older than me. I love my sister, but we have our differences sometimes, and she just doesn't understand. She's just really like revengeful and like upset that I never came back and that I'm not Amish. And because she left for a little while and then she went back, and now she's married and has, I don't know, 11 or 12 kids. I can't keep track. It's 11 or 12. And she's really resentful because I never went back. And she sat me down when I got, like, after lunch, and she like pretty much laid into me, and she was really upset. She's like, I was going to write you a letter and tell you you can never come here again because of your book. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, why? She's like, because of, she was so certain that I wrote about her. And I was like, you know what? I actually had written about you, but before I published it, I took all of those things out about her and my other sister, because it's not, first of all, it's not my place to tell their story, but they're Amish and they have a family, and I don't want to disrupt their life.
Good for you.
So I would not do that to them. And she felt a little bit better, but I found out later that her and her husband are obsessed about getting a copy of my book. Now, they're going to have a real eye-opener when they get this book, because I don't think they have any idea. Like, there's some really spicy, erotic scenes in there, number one, and all the other stuff. Like, I just don't think they have any idea what they're going to...
When did you write this book?
I wrote it for... It took me 11 years to publish, and I published it in August last year.
And how's it doing?
It's doing actually pretty good.
Because I would love to read it. I just think your story is absolutely amazing.
Super unique.
When we sat down to do this interview, I was ready for the Amish way, the brainwashing and the tactics and how you got out, and the transition that you went through. I did not see the stripping and the prostitution and the crack coming. But with all that said, I'm not judging, because I'm in recovery and I did although I didn't strip, but I went to strip clubs, so I did all that.
Right.
So I've been in your shoes, and I can only applaud you. So where are you today? Tell us about your life today.
My life today is It's so peaceful and beautiful. I have a partner. It's going to be 7 years in August since we've been together, and we
Good for
have,
you.
like I said, the 3-year-old daughter. We live on 4 acres in southern Arizona,
Oh,
and
nice.
we have. I try to, live healthy and free. We're both financially we both are financial debt free
Oh,
and
Good.
have financial freedom and stuff. And I don't know, life is what you make it. But I finally found the freedom and the peace I would like. The freedom, the peace I was searching for when I left the Amish. I finally found it.
It
Like
took
I'm.
it took 20 years, but you
It
found
took
it.
20 years. Yes, I live a
But
very peaceful life and happy life now. So
can I make an observation? And please tell me if I'm off base or not on target here. But you had mentioned earlier in the interview that you like to put on the Amish dress once in a while. Pure speculation, just a guess, that maybe it's a little bit of you want to relive that life prior to those 20 years of debauchery. And by putting on that dress, you kind of relive your childhood again. Any
absolutely. It really like because honestly, like being Amish, I think it's a cult, but it's such a peaceful way to live. And at the same time as it's controlling, but it brings back like these awesome memories of like my warm, happy childhood that I had. And I don't want to forget where I came from. Like it really was a peaceful, happy place when I was a little girl. It was wonderful.
Naomi, when I was growing up, I had family in Canada and uh, throughout the United States, and my father traveled. We would just get in the car and go. And we lived in Arizona. My dad was in the army in the late '60s. He was in the Vietnam War, but he wasn't. He was a doctor at a fort, and he would treat the boys when he came back. We traveled everywhere, and we would do a lot of camping, and that's when I would run into the Amish. We'd be just driving through Iowa one day, and I would see this black buggy with a couple of horses with that triangle on the back. I remember that orange triangle, right? Because you have to have that triangle because you're a slow moving vehicle.
Well, we couldn't even have those.
oh,
We
wow.
were so
Really? Why
strict.
not?
No, it's terrible. It's very dangerous because
Oh, that
the
is.
community didn't allow it. Like the bishop doesn't allow it. And it's really awful
Wow.
because more and more accidents are happening. They just have little reflective strips and one lantern that's not very bright. So we could
Oh,
only
I was
have
under the
those.
impression that was like
They don't all, no.
a
I
motor
have a
vehicle like law in the state that if you're a slow moving vehicle, you had to have that triangle.
I have a newspaper clippings from both of my grandfathers, and there's a couple other Amish men, some of the elders, bishops. My uncle, that's a bishop's in the picture as well. From 1988, they went to court in Grand Rapids and they won, so that they did not have to
No
do the
kidding.
triangles. Yes, so they
Well,
actually were trying to make him do the triangles, but they won in court.
but I just remember seeing the Amish everywhere, and I don't know. I remember asking my dad, what is that? And I also visited many farms. So my mom had a cousin. I want to say Canada, but it might have been somewhere in Wisconsin or whatever. We would go there and visit every summer. And down in Maryland, my father owned some Black Angus cows. I think they're called cows or whatever they are, and he invested in them, and we would go down and live on the. So I had some experience in farm life, and you're right, it's very tranquil. Of course, this was back in the '70s, so there were no cell phones, there were no video games,
A
there
lot
wasn't what
fewer
we have today.
distractions.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I enjoyed the farm life. I remember milking cows, and yeah, it was fun, and I kind of miss those days. Now I have a sister, like I mentioned before we recorded, who lives in Northwest Pennsylvania, and they do business with the Amish. So I don't know what sect. I don't know if they're the Schwarzentrubers or if they're more liberal or, but my brother-in-law is does a lot of carpentry, does a lot of woodwork, and he works with the Amish because the Amish are very good with woodworking.
They're extremely good with woodworking. I have one brother that makes furniture in Michigan, like
Yep.
bedroom furniture, cabinets, and all that stuff. And one of my brothers that just moved from Iowa back to Michigan, he was making like cedar lawn furniture
Yep.
and also bedroom sets. Like it's amazing the things they do, and building houses and barns and
So
everything.
how do they sell that? So they make it. They don't obviously have a storefront, or do they make it custom? Like, so somebody would come to them and say, "I need cabinetry for my kitchen," or I need lawn furniture.
So my brother in Michigan, he was with the strict church. He's about to go to be with the less strict church. He does have a store with like a showroom, and he has a sign by the road, but he does not have like Google or no internet like that. It's just all word of mouth. It's literally word of mouth.
Well,
And then my brother and I with the lawn furniture did as well. It was mostly word
I'm
of mouth.
actually in Michigan and I own an Amish table. I'm sitting at an Amish table. This is an
Wow.
Amish chair right here. I'm sitting at, and we purposely
that's
bought
funny.
this because it's a super sturdy table, and we had 3 boys. Yeah, they do make really good furniture.
Yes, they make very good furniture.
About 15 years ago, I was, I don't want to say where I work now, but where I worked at that time, I was working in a lumber yard. Let's just say that. And there was a builder, a general contractor, who his clientele or his customers wanted Amish shutters.
Yeah.
And I remember this was the strangest thing. We had to find somebody in Pennsylvania who we could call, who could then walk down a mile and get in touch with an Amish carpenter. And it took us weeks to get the specs to him and the color, and then I think it was 4 months later we finally got the stuff delivered to New York, but he couldn't deliver it. He had to give it to this guy who put it on a truck. And because in my mind I'm thinking, are they gonna bring these shutters on a horse and buggy into New York City? So anyway, I'm fascinated by the Amish. I agree with you. It's a peaceful lifestyle. Unfortunately, I know that the sect that you were with were more strict. I don't believe in corporal punishment, and of course, if you couldn't pronounce your th, you got beat for that. I mean, that's just horrible.
I know, right? It is what it is, and I'm glad that I got out, and I'm grateful to have my Amish family still, there. And my mom, the last day before I went to the airport, I was talking to my dad in the buggy shop because he makes buggies, and she was like, we didn't like when you left either. And she was talking about my nieces and nephews because my sister was kind of blaming me for them leaving, but she was like, we didn't like when you left either. But since you're choosing to live like that, we really wish you well, and we hope that you have a happy life that you're living. And I was like, thank you. Like that's so nice.
That's different. That's different than some of the other cults. Once you're excommunicated, they want nothing to do with you, which might still be the case, but at least they wished you well, and you can come back to visit, but you have to wear your dress if you want to go in the house. So.
But only because she's not baptized. If
right.
she wasn't baptized, she wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
Well, one question I didn't get to ask or you didn't bring up was, is alcohol allowed in the Amish community?
So they're not supposed to buy alcohol from like the store, even though sometimes like we used it for home remedies. Like my dad, we always had whiskey, and when we would get sick, they would mix whiskey with warm water and ginger ale and lemon, and we would have to like drink it. It wasn't a lot. We would drink it down before we went to bed if we were sick. But they make dandelion wine, grape wine, like different kind of wines they can make, but it's only supposed to be for medicinal purposes.
Okay.
But there sadly are some Amish alcoholics that there are some people that
Oh,
buy
Abuse it.
and drink and are addicted
alcoholism
to it.
has no. It doesn't discriminate.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't discriminate. You can be
Right.
whatever race, religion, creed, and if you get the bug, you get the alcohol bug. Doesn't
Right.
matter where you are. So
Just say one thing if I
sure,
could.
sure.
Oh yeah.
Before I forget. So my mom, so she said that she wishes me well and she hopes I have a good life. But there's something that has come up twice now since I've left actually, and since they've lived in Iowa. So this time I was there for 9 days, and this other time that it came up I was there for like 10 days. So my parents don't mind that I come to visit once a year, but if I stay too long, like my mom came and she's like, maybe you shouldn't come for this long. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like bother you guys. She's like, you didn't bother us, but it's just hard when you're here for that long. So they welcome me, but there's still like this little thing where
Like
I stay longer than a week. It always comes up.
yeah,
So
No.
you can come visit for 3 days, but a week is too long. Yeah.
that's too much. So I was like, okay.
Did you ever fly a plane?
Not
In a
until
plane?
I left the Amish. I do now, but Amish,
okay.
the Amish, the way I grew up. My youngest sister, her church, they're allowed to fly, but the Swartzentruber Amish, they're not allowed to. They can
Okay.
travel by Greyhound and train.
I made a note here because I wanted to ask this question back when we were talking about the Rumspringa. Have you watched Breaking Amish? Have you watched that,
I have not watched that.
Okay. I'm just going to tell the
No, I
audience
have not.
that if they want to know a little bit more about Rumspringa and the Amish and how they refer to the English and all that, I've watched that show, and it's actually, I don't know how accurate it is. That's what I was going to ask you, if you knew how accurate it was, and if you haven't watched it, you don't know. But it does go into it. It actually follows a bunch of young people that are doing Rumspringa and then making their decision whether they're going to be Amish or English. That's how I knew that term, of anybody who's not Amish is referred to as English. So that was the one question. And I do want to let the audience know, because where I found Naomi was TikTok, and you can see her in her Amish outfit and showing you how to do your hair the Amish way. And she's got a page full of information about the Amish. So we will put that in your the show notes as well, Naomi. I'm sure you want people to come watch you on TikTok, and we'll promote that for you, and your book, of course, obviously, too. So, but I'm just going to say she's got a very interesting TikTok page.
And Instagram as well. I'm at Amish Inspiration on TikTok and Instagram.
Oh, Instagram too.
Of course, our podcast, we will follow you. And Naomi, I just an amazing story. I feel for you, because I know that you did go through some trauma in the Amish and after you left, but you have a happy ending. And
yes, and I'm on a healing journey, and life is what you make it. And I just want to say to people, like, don't give up. I always knew that I could have a better life. I just had to choose to make it better. Like, you can choose to do better if you really want to be better. You just have to you can't give up. There's always hope, and you can choose to see the light. It's always there. Like,
we have learned so much. We have learned so much just in this little episode. I'm thrilled that you came on, and yeah, your story has some difficult parts to hear, but I'm glad that you're open enough to share even the difficult parts of your story. We're thrilled to have you on the show sharing your story, and our first Amish. So that certainly makes it a little bit more interesting for our listeners too, to learn something about your culture. And I love the fact that you still hold on to some of your culture too. That's kind of neat. I like that.
Where can we find your book?
On Amazon. Yes. The Amazing Adventures of an Amish Stripper. It's an erotic memoir. So you guys know.
Oh my God! Look at that title. Look at that cover. I would like a signed copy of that book, and I will read that book.
I'll just mail you guys a copy. You guys send me an address, and I'll get you guys a copy of it so you can read it.
That's amazing. To the audience.
Well, thank you.
Melody, let's see if we get a copy of that book for the cover art. Maybe that'll be the cover art.
Oh, you mean for the
Yeah,
for
I can
episode?
send you guys a picture.
Yes,
for the episode, yeah.
Yes, send us that image. Well, we can use that for your cover art. That'd be fun. Yes, I think it will,
Okay.
because then the
Yeah.
audience will know what we're talking about.
Yes. It kind of
Amazing.
sums it up. When I thought of that, it took me a while to come up with the name, and like I said, it took me 11 years to write it and get it published. But I'm glad I never gave up. And one day it just
Good.
kind of came to me. I was like, "Oh,
Well,
that
it's a catchy title.
like sums it all up."
Yes.
Yeah.
I have one more question, then we're going to let you go, and it's a very, very, very personal question, and you don't have to answer it, or you may not have even thought of it yet. Will you be telling your daughter about your book? And if she's 3, obviously she wouldn't understand now, but when she's 10, 12, 15, do you think you
I
will
will
share that?
absolutely share this with her, and I will do my best to educate her about sex and drugs
Good for you.
and the things that can happen if you go down these roads that I
Good.
traveled.
Then
Of
you're a
course, I
good
can't.
parent.
I won't
Yes.
control. Like I can't obviously control all of her life, but I feel like if I educate her about these things, that hopefully they will not happen to her,
Yes, I
and
think
that
that's
she can
that's
stay
perfect
safe.
answer.
Perfect answer and great
Yeah.
parenting, because that's
Yes.
exactly
Thank
what a
you.
parent should do.
Like
So,
she needs to be aware that this stuff is out there and that it can happen and that it's just
because
you
you
know.
were not aware, you had no idea that there was stripping and cocaine and crack and prostitution outside
Right.
of the Amish culture, and so
Well,
Yeah, I
no,
wasn't aware of the
no.
dangers. I was like, oh, if my friends can do it, then I can do
yeah.
it too.
But it works the opposite, because my father did sit me down at 14 or 15 and told me all about the dangers of drugs and alcohol. And of course, I turned out to be an alcoholic and drug addict. So it does work both ways. I'm sober today, so that there's
Congratulations.
the good
That's
news. Yeah.
amazing. I'm
So
so happy for you, Andrew.
thank
I
you.
know it can be very challenging,
Uh
but
huh.
clearly you took on the challenge and you didn't give up, and you're here on the
I
other
did
side
not.
like I am. So
Yeah.
good for you.
All
Yes.
right. Naomi, thank you for joining us. You're
thank
an
you.
angel, and just
Thank
an
you.
amazing person and an amazing story.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. It was really fun, and I'm glad that we got to chat.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Us
Thank
too.
you for coming
Okay.
on the show. We
All
appreciate
right,
it.
Naomi. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
We want to thank Naomi so much for coming on the show, sharing her story, giving us a little bit of insight into the Amish community, which I think a lot of us are curious about. A lot of us don't know a lot about it. There's a lot of secrecy about the Amish community. So we want to thank her for opening up our eyes to some of the things and actually explaining what some of the things mean that we didn't even understand. So thank you again, Naomi, for coming on the show.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the episode, growing up, I saw the Amish everywhere, and I found them fascinating. What's more interesting, and we talked about this off mic, so there's this TV show on Netflix called Longmire. I don't know if the audience has heard of it, but there is a sheriff who oversees this county, and they're right by an Indian reservation, so there's a lot of conflict because the Indians up there have their own police force and all this stuff. But believe it or not, there was an episode on Longmire in season 1 where there were 3 Amish teenagers that were going through Romspringer. One of them was a stripper. She got involved in stripping, and I think she was killed in the episode. I'm sorry for the spoiler, but if you haven't seen it. But I found that I just watched that last week because I have COVID and I'm home watching TV, and I was watching Longmire, and this episode was eerily similar to Naomi's story, very much eerily, except that the woman Naomi didn't get killed, and in this episode, the woman did.
Yes,
Thank
which we're
God
very
Naomi's alive,
for.
but
Yes.
yeah, very grateful for. But the point I'm making at is that Hollywood is acknowledging that So are the Amish women all flooding to like strip clubs? Is this something that they're? I don't know. It's just I just found it odd that I tuned into Longmire one day and there was an Amish strip girl. Yeah, it is weird.
It is weird
So,
that
anyway,
it
I
happened
just
right
wanted to
after
mention
right after we did this interview. How strange, huh?
It was like a week later, and I thought it was very odd, and I thought Naomi's story was a little off the beaten path. Like,
Yeah.
who would think that an Amish person would go from planting carrots every day and wearing full black skirts to taking her clothes off in Las Vegas? I'm not judging. I'm just saying it just seems, it's just weird that I saw it as a plot on one of the TV shows on Netflix. So very odd.
It is. It's a very strange coincidence. So, but we'll have to, if we get a chance, we'll have to ask Naomi about that, or maybe she'll hear this episode and she'll email us and give us an answer if this is like a common thing. Maybe it is, and we just aren't aware. So
I'd be curious if they came to her for that story, but it's probably unlikely. But I think both strippers ended up in Las Vegas. So, but Las Vegas is the stripper capital of the world. So
yeah, that's true too. So we want to thank Naomi once again for coming on the show, for sharing her story, for educating us and enlightening us on the Amish community. And we want to thank all of you for tuning in to Cultimatum. Your support is always appreciated. So if you could please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on platforms such as Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep listening to all of our latest episodes.
You can also show your support by joining our Facebook group under the name Cultimatum Podcast.
And you can also find us on additional social media platforms, including Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, and YouTube.
If you have a cult or human trafficking experience you'd like to share with us, please feel free to contact us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
And ex-cult members looking for additional support can consider joining the Cult Escape and Recovery group on Facebook.
And if you're interested in hearing more from me, you can find me on my other podcast, Anonymous Andrew, Life and the Choices We Make.
And stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you're not alone.